Hello, and welcome to the world of Tyria. Tyria is a world where the events of the past rise to haunt, sometimes literally, the people of the present. So in order to fully understand the peoples and events of today, we must look backward to the people and events that set the stage for the present. In this series of videos, we will explore the great Elvish Empire, its rise, achievements, and its tragic fall, and the impact this Tyria-spanning empire still has on people thousands of years after its end. Part 1. The Birth of the Elves. In the mythic past, after the giants and dragons had exhausted themselves in a great war, the gods of the Seldarine came upon the world to deposit their children, the elves, upon the world. The island where the act of creation occurred is named in religious texts as the womb of the people, or Sareg Iven in High Elvish. It was here the Seldarine gave their gifts to the children: long life, the ability to travel between Tyria and the realm of Fairy, a birth rate similar to other races, and the most fateful gift, a mote of their divinity that would imbue them with great creativity and the ability to tap into the power of Tyria itself to work wizardly magic. Scholars disagree on whether or not Sareg Iven exists or is a myth, but those sages who do believe it exists place it not on Tyria, but in the realm of Fairy. The elves grew and learned the arts of civilization, building, farming, forging, and the art of sailing from the gods, and in time the elves were told to travel to Tyria and live among the peoples of the world, but they were admonished to always use their gifts to work with nature and not against it, and so the elves created a great fleet and set sail to Tyria, arriving on the western shore of the continent of Albris. The elves made their first landfall in the place that would become the capital of the great Elvish Empire, Luminara, and the rest of the fleet spread up and down the west coast of Albris, settling in places that seemed fair to them. Soon the landings became villages, then towns, then city-states, and finally realms that integrated into the fabric of life on Albris, engaging in war, trade, and diplomacy with their neighbors, all the time slowly advancing the art of wizardry and tapping into the wellsprings of power from the world to create even stronger magics, always holding to the decree of the gods that they should work with nature instead of against it. The first violation of this edict came from Luminara with the invention of the flying boat, which allowed anyone, not just wizards, to travel great distances, which greatly enhanced trade and diplomacy for the realm. Eventually, despite the warnings from the priests, the other Elvish realms came to Luminara to learn these new secrets, and in the spirit of fellowship the king allowed the other wizards to learn all they could from Luminara's masters. Once the first violation of the gods' edict occurred, a flood of new discoveries and inventions followed, with the first one being the Heartstones. These are crystal balls that can collect the ambient energy of an area and power magical items, with the effect covering an entire province if the Heartstone is attached to a wellspring of power. These magical items are less costly and easier to create, so magical items become more and more common, making life easier for the elves and spurring more and more innovations. It was at this time that the faith of the elves began to wane, with more and more elves turning to a philosophy called the Way of the White Tree, which taught the elves to explore the divinity within themselves, and the teachers, who were called seekers, were able to tap into their divinity and were able to use priestly magic. While these events were occurring, the king of Luminara, Seharoas, looked upon his realm, the realms of his fellow elves, and the realms of the other peoples allied to them, and concluded that by combining their might they could elevate the lives of everyone under the guidance of the wisest of the elves. To this end he sent his fleet of flying ships to the other Elvish kings and invited them to a great council. The kings agreed, and during this council the King Saharoas proposed they merged their realms into a single empire in order to pool their knowledge and resources so they may protect and improve the lives of the elves and their allies. A 3-month-long debate occurred on how this would be accomplished, and eventually everyone agreed and the details were worked out. There would be an emperor who would govern with a ruling council of 2 chambers, an upper chamber consisting of the former kings who would make laws and policy for the empire, and the lower chamber which consisted of representatives of both elves and the nations of allied peoples who decided to join the empire and would handle appointments, propose laws, and handle taxation. The empire was called the Realm of the United Elvish Peoples, or Erin na Linion et Helen in High Elvish, but non-elves simply called it the Great Elvish Empire. The event of the founding of the empire was signified in a new calendar. The newly devised Elvish calendar based on the sun and the years were now listed as Yu, or Year of Unification, with the day of the proclaiming of the new empire being the first day of the year. It was at this time that most traditional ways of Elvish life have disappeared or are fading away, and the people of the empire celebrated what they saw as a bright future for their people and Tyria as a whole. But not everyone was cheering these developments. There were still traditional elves who were horrified over the discarding of the commandments of the gods, and they eventually left their communities to strike out across the sea to found new, more traditional realms outside the reach of the empire, and they traveled all over Tyria to found realms outside the reach of their heretical kin. Once the empire was on a stable footing, they decided to explore the rest of Tyria to look for their lost kin and found colonies in unclaimed forests, and to this end, they created a fleet of ocean and airships called the Great Imperial Armada, who spread out all over the planet using magic to keep the Imperial Court appraised of their findings. The Great Imperial Armada came across these traditional elves and offered them membership in the empire. Some of these realms who were engaged in conflicts with their neighbors quickly took up the offer, seeing the higher technology and greater magic of the empire as the edge they needed to settle their conflicts. Other realms rejected their offer, and the Great Imperial Armada established diplomatic relations with these still independent realms, but relations were never better than strained. During their explorations, the Great Imperial Armada came across 3 groups of elves that have changed since they left their original homelands. The Lisuin Edhil, or Snow Elves, the Rankathan Edhil, or Running Elves, and the Benin Edhil, or Undersea Elves. The Snow Elves drifted further north and south than is normal for the elves and became isolated and insular, rejecting any contact with the empire. The Sea Elves were normal elves who had a love for sailing and the ocean, and entreated the gods to change them so they could live in the sea and away from the heretical elves, and their prayers were granted. The Sea Elves had no desire to join the empire, but they would trade with the empire when they required non-magical surface goods, with each exchange being approved by the priests to make sure no heretical goods entered Sea Elf society. The Running Elves traveled overland to the eastern plains and deserts, and for some unknown reason they were stripped of the gift of long life. There they became herders and raiders, eschewing the use of mounts except for the very old and infirm, and attacking the city-states of what would become the Asheri Empire, and some ancient legends attribute the actions of these elves to the continual hostility between the Asheri Empire and the Great Elvish Empire. When the Great Imperial Armada's skyships made contact, the Running Elves they either rejected entirely or they tried to rob the Imperial Elves. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, as it helps get the video to a wider audience. If you like the channel, and if you can, please consider financially supporting us in our work to bring Tyria to the gaming public with a one-time donation to PayPal or a monthly donation on Patreon. The links to both are in the video description. Thank you for watching our video, and we'll see you on the next one.